Welcome, guys, back to the Grateful Living Podcast. Today, I'm thankful to have John Hargrave with me today. John is the CEO of Media Shower, a media company that helps companies communicate better. He is also an executive board member for the Boston Blockchain Association and is also the publisher of Bitcoin Market Journal, a journal trusted by over 100,000 blockchain investors monthly. John is also the author of the book Blockchain for Everyone, Mind Hacking, How to Change Your Mind for Good in 21 Days, which has over 150,000 copies sold worldwide. And he is also the co-author with Evan Karnoupakis for the book Blockchain Success Stories. John, thank you so much for joining us.
I am grateful to be here today, Arnav. And first of all, you have the best podcast name ever, I think. Grateful Living. I'm a big fan of gratefulness.
Yeah, no, it's a phrase I use in the good and bad times, and I think it's a phrase we have to remind ourselves, that it's good to be living, breathing, healthy, and all that.
And when we're grateful, we're in a state of flow with the universe, as opposed to being grumpy and complaining, which puts us in a state of conflict with life and with reality. So that to me is the real virtue of being grateful. I try to make it a habit constantly in my life.
Yeah, no, you in many ways decide your attitude and the way and energy you give off to the world when you wake up in the morning.
Yeah, just like we can start this podcast with some gratefulness. I'm grateful to be here with you.
Grateful to have you. Excited for what we can learn.
That's good. Well, we're done now, everybody. Thank you. Good night.
So, John, for those of us that don't know you as well, kind of take us back to the beginning, where you grew up, your family situation, what type of kid you were, things like that.
Yeah, I was a bright and precocious child that grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in Ohio. And I came out to Boston to go to music school for college, and I ended up getting a job at one of the very first .com companies. It was a company called ZDNet, and they're still around, ZDNet.com. And it was such an exciting time to be alive because it was kind of the birth of the internet, and we were working at, essentially, it was like a computer magazine publisher that was going online. So we were one of the first companies to go online. So I ended up not going into music as a career, but going into this online publishing industry. And it was just the greatest. Talk about being grateful. I'm so fortunate that I landed here in Boston, and I landed at that company at the time I did, because it really set the path for my life. It was a great job. It was a great experience. So much fun seeing the rise of the internet, and it prepared me so well for so many of the challenges and things that I would see later in life, such as today, the whole birth of cryptocurrency, which is what I'm currently involved with. So that's a very short flyby of the whole trajectory of how my life has gone so far. It's been a great ride.
Yeah. I'm curious, given where you are today, the founder and CEO of Media Shower, was entrepreneurship, something you did as a young kid, or is it something you had always known that you want to, start your own business one day, or did that come later in life?
Yeah, well, growing up, I had a paper route. And for those of you who are not of my generation, there used to be these things called newspapers, and they were delivered by something called a paper boy. It was a very sexist time. There were paper girls, paper carriers. And I have to say, it was not a very good paper boy. I was good at getting the papers there on time, but you also had to do this thing called collection, which is you had to go door to door and ask for your money every week. And growing up in sort of a middle-class neighborhood in Ohio, a lot of people just didn't want to pay for their paper. They loved getting the paper, but they didn't like paying for it. So that part was really difficult for me, but it was really great training as an entrepreneur, because I found out throughout my journeys later in life, a lot of people don't want to pay for anything, even when it comes to professional services like our company does. So you do have to stay on top of what we call your receivables, which is the money coming in. But that experience, and sometimes those childhood jobs are really good and really formative for teaching you some of those lessons and developing those skills that you have to learn later in life. Now, decades later, I ended up going back to business school. So after I got my undergrad in music, I saw that I needed to brush up my business skills, and I went back and got an MBA at Babson College, which is #1 in the country for entrepreneurship. So that was very helpful because then I was able to learn how you really build a business. And I have to say that education was world class. It was really top notch. And so today I could go collect money from newspaper customers like nobody's business. I could clean up the whole block and make everybody pay. That's how good I am at this today,
Yeah.
Arnav.
Yeah. Also curious, I mean, the listeners will learn later in the story, but, given things like you invested in Bitcoin in 2013, I'm curious, were you always fascinated by technology and the next thing as a young person, or again, did that kind of come later in life?
Yeah, well, two things really helped me with this. And I would say that future focus has served me very well in my life and in my career. And two things helped. So one was, again, working at a technology company early on because our job was to sort of look at what's next and coming down the road, and evaluating what technologies were likely to take hold. The second was I got really involved with this magazine called Wired Magazine, and I have their premiere issue, 1.0, the very first issue, and I read it religiously for many years. And that's a very future-focused type of magazine. So that really instilled in me this love of kind of, figuring out what's next and trying to anticipate it. And as today I'm an investor as well as an entrepreneur, and those things are very much relying on looking at what's ahead, what's coming down the road. And so having that future focus through those two experiences has been helpful. And anybody can do it. So anybody can read Wired; it's still around, or you can read kind of future focused blogs or news articles or things like that are going to help you understand what's coming down the road and really try to develop that love of, fall in love with the future.
Yeah. I'm curious. So you said you went to Berklee, I guess your thought process, maybe your high school senior year and then throughout your time at Berklee, was it to go into the music field and do something there?
Yeah, so to be clear for your listeners, we're talking about Berklee College of Music, located in Boston, Berklee, not Berkeley, California, which everybody always confuses it with. So I went to Berklee, which is a very prestigious school for modern music, so like jazz, and has produced some of the biggest artists around today, and jazz and pop music as well. And my mother was a musician, and she had, as an entrepreneur, she had her own business teaching piano lessons. So I grew up around that. There were always kids coming into my house and taking piano lessons. She taught out of our house, and I also played the piano and the violin, and then later the bass. And so I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life at that point. There was always a strong love of technology. So I had like one of the first personal computers back in the day, a Commodore 64. But that wasn't really a thing. That wasn't really a career path yet when I went into college. And so so I went into music because it was the thing that I knew and I loved. But even coming out of Berklee, I had decided, like, there aren't a lot of music companies that are hiring bassists right now. So I might
Yeah.
want to investigate some other ways to make a living. And as I said, that's when this opportunity came along with ZDNet, and it was just beautifully timed.
Yeah. Uh, before we get into, I guess media shower, I saw, you worked at several different companies, as you mentioned, um, Ziff Davis Interactive, Yahoo Computing, ZDNet. You were at Babson. Um, does anything stand out from, those first 10 years in, so-called corporate America, or, any piece of advice or lessons that you take from that time period that you'd like to pass on to others?
Yeah, yeah. Watch great leaders wherever you go and observe what they do and try to add those skills to your skill stack. So I'm a big believer in skill stacks, and that's kind of what I started learning from that first job. So again, I had sort of a hobbyist experience with computers, but I wasn't trained in technology. I had a music degree. And it turns out these leaders at ZDNet, these managers, they built an outstanding team. To this day, one of the best teams I've worked with. And I came back years later and I said, how did you find so many great like kids right out of school? And they said, we basically went around and hired all the smart people who were unhireable. And they go, what was your major? And I said, music. And they said, bingo. So they went and they had like philosophy majors, like all these people who
Yeah.
are never going to get a job. They basically said, like, do you know computers and are you reasonably intelligent? And then can we kind of mash those two together and form you into a super group? And that's what they did. And they had just such a high performing, outstanding team, high morale, just a lot of fun. People who were very innovative, future focused, and had the ability to think and get stuff done. So those leaders of that early that my early work experience, I knew I was lucky, but I didn't know how lucky I was until later on. I went and worked at other places in corporate America, and I saw it's not nearly so good. Like a lot of times, you're in a very bad situation. It's not fun. So even in those situations, I learned to find the talent and find people who I could learn from and try to interface with those folks, try to have a mind meld so that I could contribute to them and they could contribute to me and we could each make each other better. So find the greatness wherever it exists. And it does exist even in some small form in every organization and every institution.
Yeah. And so right before Media Shower, you were at Arnold Worldwide as a group interactive director. I'm curious, what was going on in your mind, in 2007, kind of a tough time period economically to decide to start a, marketing agency business, or, however you would like to, kind of a communications business.
Yeah, so Arnold Worldwide is a large traditional ad agency. And so I went out of getting my MBA into this ad agency. And that was, again, a very informative experience for me to learn how the agency world works. Because what we ended up building at Media Shower was something like an agency. We're like a cross between an agency and like a technology platform, like a SaaS platform. But learning how agencies work was very interesting. So the whole experience of how TV commercials get made and how web banner ads get made. That's what I did. Was I ran the whole interactive team that did all those banner ads that everyone loves. We had tons of creative people. It was a really exciting and energized environment. And I also knew pretty quickly, like, this is not for me long term. Like, this is something that I'm here to learn this part of how this business works. But then I really want to go build something on my own, and that's eventually what we did.
Yeah. Before we get to Media Shower, prior to that, two personal things happened in your life. I believe you get married during this time period, and then you also get sober. Um,
Yeah,
could
in
you
that order,
speak
by the
to?
way.
um, could you speak to, just I guess, first, any advice you have to people, on their personal lives, and you know, um, you know, finding the one, and then also on the second part, what made you, um, take that decision, and make that change in your life.
Yeah, so for in terms of getting married, I got very lucky that I met a woman who I not only loved, but who has been just an incredible life partner for me. I believe that a huge amount of your success in life is going to rely on who you choose as a life partner, if you make that decision. And the reason is because you either give energy to each other and work as a team to accomplish things greater than any of you could accomplish yourselves, or you do the opposite and you sort of pull energy away from each other. And I've seen that be really debilitating in some relationships and some marriages. So we were both very fortunate that we found each other, and my wife Jade plays a large part in the stories, the books that you mentioned. She's in all of those books because she has been such a huge part of my life, of my success, and of my company. She actually runs the financial operations for our company. She's our CFO. So we are fortunate to not only have a great marriage, but we also have this great business and we work well together and we're able to kind of navigate this kind of tricky balance between the personal and the professional that we have to do every day. We're sitting right next to each other. And yet we come out of the office and we're husband and wife again and friends, right? And partners.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
so getting married is terrific. I think it is a fantastic institution, the institution of marriage. I've been very grateful and fortunate, blessed that to find somebody that I love and who works so well with me.
Yeah. And I think around 2006, you decided to, you know, stop drinking alcohol. Um, can you talk about what went into that decision, and, maybe any advice you have to someone, trying to become sober?
Yeah, so this is the story that starts off my book, Mind Hacking. And so throughout this time, I had been publishing a comedy blog on the web called Zug.com, Zug.com. And it was the first comedy site on the internet. I started it while I was still at ZDNet, and it grew and grew, and it was kind of a side hustle for me for many years. And we were known for these outrageous pranks. We would prank like celebrities, and the prank that got me in trouble was one with then Senator Barack Obama. And I had gotten out a credit card in Barack Obama's name, and when he was when he was nominated as the Democratic nominee for president, I got a knock on the door from the Secret Service. So the Secret Service came to my house, Arnav, and let me just say, you never want the Secret Service at your
No.
house unless you're the president. That's the
Yeah.
one time. Otherwise, not a good scene. So they said to me, yeah, the problem is we not only protect the president, we also protect the nation's money supply. So by getting a credit card in the potentially future president's name, you've put yourself in the crosshairs of what we do. Uh, and it was a terrifying experience. It was really, really scary. And after they left, I was just shaking. And my wife is saying, should we call an attorney? Like, what do we do? Where do we go? How do we do this? And she says, you have to get rid of the weed. So I had weed in the house. And at that point, I was a regular smoker. I really enjoyed it. I felt it was very creatively fulfilling for me. It helped me get ideas out and so forth. And I knew I was also addicted. And so when she said, you have to get rid of this in case they come back, I'm like, they're not going to find it. What are they going to do? Search the house? And she's like, you have to get rid of it. So I made this decision that I was going to go cold turkey and give it all up, the alcohol, the weed, everything. And she didn't ask me to do that. She just asked me to get rid of it. But I knew that I wouldn't be able to do that. I knew that my mind was so addicted to it that I would find a way to get it back in the house, probably after
Yeah.
3 days. So I went and threw it in a dumpster along with all of the alcohol in the house. I had like these old vintage bottles of wine and Italian grappa and all this stuff. And I threw it all in a dumpster behind this supermarket. It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life that night, throwing away all that stuff. And the only way I got through it, Arnav, was I focused on the muscle movement. So I couldn't think about what I was doing. If I thought about the long-term implications of being sober, I would never go through with it. So I just focused just on like the muscle movement, just doing that. And so that was my first, what I ended up calling a mind hack. And it was a way of like overriding your own thinking in order to like move your life in the direction you want to go. And so later, as I remained sober over the first few months, which were excruciatingly difficult, but it did get easier over time. As I remained sober, I started creating a collection of these mind hacks, these little ways of reprogramming my mind, reprogramming my thinking. And what I found was, well, there were so many problem thoughts that I had that were causing me to drink and causing me to smoke weed in the first place, that if I could reprogram all those, then I could get to this much better place and just be happier, just be living a life that was more creatively fulfilling and peaceful. So that is what became my next book, Mind Hacking. And to date, that's been my most successful book. It sold, I think, about 150,000 copies, and just tons of people have written me and said, like, thank you for sharing your story and for sharing these tools and techniques and exercises that we can use to reprogram our own minds.
I'm curious, did you ever get close to drinking alcohol or smoking, or were you pretty good?
Well, the temptation is very strong in especially the first, I'll say year of getting sober. It was really, really hard. Was really fortunate. I tell more of the story in the book, but I was very fortunate that I had a friend who was in 12-step groups. And he was just a lifesaver for me because he, literally he saved my life. He came and helped walk me through those programs. That helped a lot. I got really serious about meditation. That helped a lot. And over time, what you find if you practice these things, if you really work these programs, that the cravings do go away. And one of those mind hacks that I used during that time was I said, this to me right now is a curse. It's just a curse to be sober. I can't see this as anything but a curse. But then I started saying, what if I could? What if I could see this not as a curse, but actually as a blessing? And then as I went on and repeated that to myself 1,000 times, it started to become, what if this is not just a blessing? What if this is the greatest blessing in my life? And then from there, it became, what if this sobriety is not just the greatest blessing, but it is the foundation upon which all the other blessings of my life grow? And that became that mind hack, or that technique that I began just repeating myself over and over. And today, I truly believe that. I truly believe that sobriety has been the foundation of all the success that I've had since then. And I whenever I do go by the cannabis ad that are littering our highways today, I just say I'm so grateful for my sobriety. Like, it is the foundation of all the greatness in my life today, all the good things.
I don't know if you can be this introspective, but I'm sure for close friends and maybe even your wife, That was a tough time period for them. I'm curious from your perspective, how can a friend or family member be supportive of someone, you know, on that journey?
Yeah, it's so funny. I never tell my wife's side of the story during that time, but it was not fun for her either.
Yeah.
Not fun. I was a dick. I mean, I was really not a fun person to be around, and I was not kind. I was very resentful. And I was resentful of her because to me, she made me do this. It was totally my decision, but she was the impetus, and therefore it was her fault. And she was terrific. I mean, she just accepted that. She saw it, I think, as temporary. If I can help him get through this, he's going to come out to the other side. She was always positive about it. And she helped me. I just remember her getting like, there were like herbal supplements and things like that. Not that kind of herb, but like things that would
Yeah.
make you feel better and lift your mood and all that. I don't know if it helped, but she got those sorts of things for me just to show me like she was on my side. She was trying to help me work through this. And she was always 100% supportive about me taking whatever time I needed to go, to 12 step groups. And then eventually write the book and share the story. She was really great about all that. So, talk to my wife, I guess. That's the answer.
Yeah. So, 2007, you start Media Shower. I'm curious, as you look back, do you have, entrepreneurship is becoming more, let's say, sexy in today's world, but as you probably know, executing is a whole different ballgame. As you look back on those early years, are there, pieces of advice you would give to someone starting out a business, you know, save up a certain amount of money, or, you know, anything that comes to mind in, from your '07 to, 2010 years, maybe?
Yeah, I'll tell you a funny story. So this is, I guess this was right after I got sober, and so two interesting things happened. So one was I picked up this little book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. You've heard of it? You've read it before?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
know.
I've
Yeah,
read it. Yep, yep.
yeah, and that to me was a real, uh, a very influential book. I really felt that at that time, this was kind of opening the way to a new way of thinking for me. And if I had read it when I was drinking and drugging, I don't think it would have landed in the same way with me. But I really saw that here was a set again of kind of mental techniques that we could use to implant the idea in our own heads that in his view we're going to grow rich, but in my view it was more like I'm going to build a company that's going to be something that provides value to the world, value to our stakeholders, value to our employees, a great company. And that book was really great to do that. So the second thing that happened is I'm still working full time at this point, and again we had this kind of side hustle, and my wife Jade and I said let's try to go do this full time. So we put aside a savings account, and she was working full time as well, and so every paycheck we put sock it away in that savings account, and the goal was to get the account to a certain number, and we called it the FU fund, or the FUF for short. And so when the FUF got up to this point, Jade was going to leave her job and go work for the company full time, and that she did. And then when it got up to this part, then this point, then I would leave my job and go work at full time, and that I did. And it's just been a terrific ride since then. So that helped. It helped to plan for it, to have a cushion of savings there for us, just in case things didn't go as planned. To have a business started as a side hustle, so we already had some of the infrastructure and some of the work done. We kind of knew what we were doing already. Getting an MBA, of course, helped significantly, and and then just working really hard with passion and constantly learning and improving and trying to change the business based on what we're hearing from customers. All those classic things you hear about being an entrepreneur, that's what came next.
In the early years when your brand value isn't as well known, I'm curious, how did you, establish, or how did you create that trust? How did you win clients, in year 1 through 3, where, they don't know the quality of the work you're going to deliver?
Yeah, I was really into guerrilla marketing, and I have all these hilarious stories from that time of going to trade shows dressed in ridiculous costumes and outfits, often without buying a ticket to the trade show. I would just show up in some crazy pirate costume or something and walk around handing out flyers. I don't know why I thought this was a good idea, but remember, I came from doing this wacky comedy site with all these pranks, so that was sort of what I knew. That rarely worked well. So guerrilla marketing is maybe something that you do when you're in a rapid growth stage and you've already got a lot of other more mature marketing type initiatives in place. But what I eventually found was it's kind of the nuts and bolts of marketing that you really need to put into place first. So this would be things like have a great website, have a credible social media presence, be putting out some amount of good content, thought leadership. That's what our company does for our clients. And then ultimately, probably some kind of paid search. So that's like buying Google ads or buying LinkedIn ads or things like that. And I'm talking, for modern digital businesses. If you're running a pastry shop, it might be a little bit different. But those are kind of the I would say the basic building blocks of a good marketing campaign. And then you can get more creative with things like guerrilla marketing on top of that. It took me a while to learn that.
Yeah. I'm curious, you know, the economy goes up and down, and I'm sure the company did it well as well, a little bit here and there. You know, you later, you now have 2 kids. In the ups and downs, how do you make sure that your kids aren't feeling the stress of, the ups and downs of an economy, or of the company, like you losing a big client or something like that?
Well, let me I'll fast forward now and I'll talk about our big um, investment that we made because this is relevant to your question. So in 2013, my wife and I, um, and this is apart from our business, this is just as a personal investment, we went and bought Bitcoin. And in 2013, very few people knew, what Bitcoin was. The price of a single Bitcoin, I think, was $125 at that time. And it was really hard to buy it. We had to go to our bank, and then we had to send a wire transfer to Belarus. I didn't even know where Belarus was on a map. So we got the Bitcoin. So we had fortunately done our homework, and we received the Bitcoin, and then we held on to it. And I think 4 years later, that Bitcoin that we had bought, so we bought, a good chunk of it at $125 per, like buying a stock at $125 a share, had now skyrocketed to $10,000 per Bitcoin. I think this was about 2017. And I said to my wife, this is the greatest investment we have ever made. Let's go all in. So I decided that we decided after some discussion, but it was really my idea, that we were going to pivot the business and go full time into Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. So again, we have this marketing company, and we had a wide variety of clients in different industries. And I said, let's just focus entirely on Bitcoin and crypto companies. Now, at the time, that kind of made sense. It was a bold bet, but in 2017, there was this huge run up in Bitcoin price. Everybody saw it was the future. And I look back to my early days during the dot-com run up in 2000 and said, we're in the same timing right now. We got to jump on this thing right now while it's hot. So that's what we did. And things went really great for 3 months. And then the price of Bitcoin plummeted. And it went down to, I don't know, like 1,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
And with it, like this whole industry dried up overnight. And so now we had all these new clients. Nobody was paying their bills. We had to lay off staff. Um, and then things got really bad. So we ended up hanging in there for a couple of years. We had to lay off just about everybody. We had a second mortgage on our house. That means the bank owns you twice. We were down to our very last payroll, and somehow we held on, and we built the whole company back. And today, the price of Bitcoin, I think, is like $66,000, something like that.
Yeah.
And the industry is just exploding. And what we did was we ended up taking the company and diversifying. So I would say about a third of our company now is in crypto and blockchain, and the rest is in finance and technology. So they're kind of related industries. And so by doing that, we learned a super valuable lesson, and it was that you have to diversify. So when you're looking at these crypto investments or any kind of investments or any kind of company, you do have to think about how you're going to diversify your risk in case one part of that, goes down suddenly. So to get back to your question, throughout all that, I don't know that my kids ever fully knew what was happening. So they're certainly around us all the time. They have lived this business with us as they've grown up, but they're now in college and high school. I don't know that they ever understood the dire financial predicament that we were in, and that's because there's no reason to share with them that we've just had to cash in their college fund to pay our employees. No reason to talk about that today.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious. So, these technologies come around in our lifetime, but people don't act, right? So, the internet came, but a lot of people didn't get e-commerce websites, even till the 2010s, even, as far as, the last 5 years, maybe even. That investment, sending a wire transfer over to Belarus, how did you just not have that fear of like, oh, this is stupid, or like, let's wait, let's see if this is actually,
I had the fear.
Okay.
We all have the fear. The fear. Somebody put it to me really well just today. They said, like, I see all these opportunities, but I don't want to be the guy that goes and does it and then feels like a fool at the end of the day that I did it. But that is literally the game, is that you have to be willing to be a fool that goes and does it, just as I was a fool who went and bet the whole company on Bitcoin at the wrong time. But those become valuable learning experiences if we frame our lives in that way. So in other words, I've told you this whole story about my becoming sober and how it changed my life. That's my framing. That's the story I've told to myself over the years to help me make sense of this random disconnected sequence of events. Well, that's the power that we all have, is to frame our own story in those ways, to tell stories about our lives to ourselves and to others that are empowering and that help us move in a better, more purposeful direction. So when we're looking at these investment opportunities out there, and there are always many, we can be smart and, again, manage our risk, but at the same time take some risk and know that worst case scenario, if our risk turns out to be wrong and we end up losing whatever we put into it, we can tell ourselves that was a valuable learning experience. And if we believe that, it will become a valuable learning experience.
Yeah. So, John, I think a lot of people are going to tune in because of your knowledge of blockchain, Bitcoin, and so forth. Let's say there's someone out there that understands the basic concepts. It's decentralized finance. From there, what do you and let's say they haven't done anything in terms of investing or things like that, but they have a basic knowledge of what is going on. What are your recommendations for them today, or as they go forward and rest of 2021 into 2022?
Sure. Well, the first idea is to get your own financial house in order. So if you're in debt, pay off your credit card debt. If you have student loans, pay off the student loans. Get out of debt first. Second, start generating some kind of money. If you have a job already, great. Ask for a raise, or go find another job that pays more, or get a side hustle, as I did. Those are all ways of generating more money. Plenty of ways to make more money, always. Take that money then and start investing it a little bit, if you can, more if you can, whatever it is, even $100 a month, $20 a month, whatever. Put it into some kind of investment. Now, when you're thinking about those investments, the best approach we found is, again, a diversified portfolio. That just means a mix of investments. And if you go to our website, Bitcoin Market Journal, we have all this laid out in pie charts. But basically, 2/3 of that should probably be in the stock market. And that's the overall stock market, which has grown 10% each year over the last 100 years. So it's a pretty good bet. And you can buy these funds that basically invest you in the whole stock market. It's probably a better approach than trying to go out and find the next, Google or Apple or Tesla. Maybe 1/3 of that in bonds. So bonds sort of counterbalance the stocks. And again, you can get an all bond index fund. And then a small slice of that in these new crypto assets. So that's maybe up to 10%. And that 10% is kind of your mad money. That's your alternative investments. Now, within that crypto slice of the pie, if you want to keep it simple, you just buy and hold Bitcoin, and consider this a long-term investment, more than 5 years, let's say. So just like for me, it took 5 years to really get to that point. It's likely to take the same for you. And then if you want to diversify even further, you can maybe also buy a little bit of Ethereum, which is the number 2 crypto asset out there. And then there are others that you can kind of use to mix it up. But that's the simplest approach for most investors. And we show on our website that approach that I've just described has far outperformed just the average traditional investor that's gone to a financial advisor and just, taken like a stock bond mix.
Yeah. So, there's always going to be skeptics in life. Looking at it from that lens, I think the first question that comes to mind is, how do people in the blockchain community, how is something like Bitcoin viewed in terms of the long term? Like, where do you see the impact of this industry 5, 10, 15 years from now?
Yeah, sure. So let me define some terms for people who are new to this space. So blockchain is the technology. That's the underlying technology that all this stuff is built on. Just like the internet is the underlying technology upon which all these websites are built on. So blockchain is sometimes called like the internet of value. So that's like a way of transferring money or value from person to person over the internet. And then on top of blockchain are these different, what I call digital assets. So Bitcoin is the most well-known, and then Ethereum and other cryptocurrencies, although they're not really currencies, they're more like crypto assets. So that's what we're talking about. And your question is, how is this going to change the world? Well, long term, I believe that we are moving to a one world global money. So we are one planet. We have one global interconnected financial system. We're one human species. It's just simple and logical to me that we would have one type of money. Now, I don't know what that money will be or what it will look like. Many people think that Bitcoin will be that money. I'm skeptical because I don't see people using Bitcoin as money. I see them using it more like an investment, like to hold it, like gold, for example. But something will arise that is like Bitcoin. And that will become our new global money supply. Now, we'll still have, I believe, national currencies. You'll still have a dollar and a euro and so forth, but you will have one way of sharing value, and it'll be easy to transfer things over the internet with much less friction and without the need for as many banks or middlemen that we have today. Now, there will still be need for banks. There'll still be need for financial services and things like that. So it's not going to look that different as some people proclaim. But that's essentially what we're building. Now, that's exciting because that means we can rebuild the entire global financial system in a way that is smarter and fairer and greener than we have today. So I don't think our financial system is very good today. I mean, I don't think when 1% own as much as the other 99%, that's a very good system. But we have the opportunity right now to rebuild it and to make it better than the system that we have today. That's literally what's happening right now. And to me, that is the most exciting place to be in technology or in the world right now. And that is good work, and it's work that's worth devoting the rest of my lifetime to.
Yeah. Can you, you talk about in your book some of the benefits, but, for those of us that don't understand this as well, maybe some of the blockchain applications, whether it be medical records, voting, what some of the positives of this technology are on society.
Somebody explained it really well to me recently, and he said when the web was created, there was a huge missing element, which was money. Like, think about it. We never came up with a good solution, like an open standard for money. Now, of course, we can all put our credit cards online, in e-commerce sites, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about like an open protocol in the same way, like the web is an open protocol. HTML is an open protocol, right? That's how we get all the information. These things are free for people to use to distribute information. So this person was describing it to me. He said, it's the original sin of the internet. And I said, he's kind of right. Now, that was in the original spec for the internet. There was actually a proposal for a micropayment protocol that could be used in the web, but that was never implemented. So today, that's what we're doing with this blockchain technology. So if you just think about anything that's valuable that you want to actually transfer from one person to another, and that needs to function something like money, right? Because money is much different from like files on your computer. Like a file on a computer could be copied, a million times. But money, you don't want it to be copied a million times. You want it to have a kind of scarcity so that there's a controlled supply of it. Otherwise, it's not valuable. And so anything that kind of holds those properties is going to be something that could be shared on this new blockchain technology. So yeah, as you said, it could be things like your driver's license or your medical records, for example, or it could be things more abstract like, when you buy a pound of coffee, being able to track the supply chain, like to find out where that coffee was grown and harvested and everyone it went through on its way to the store shelf. That sort of thing can all be tracked using this new blockchain technology, because those are all valuable records that are actually very difficult to track in a secure way today using existing technology. But the big thing that everybody knows and cares about is money. So
Yeah.
money is the killer app for blockchain, and everything else is going to come later.
Yeah. I'm curious, there's so much going on in the space right now. How do you educate yourself? And maybe I'll set this up by saying, there are some coins that grew like whatever 1,000% this year, and then there are some coins where it was a scam and the founders took back their money as soon as they raised the money. How does a common consumer try to educate themselves with so much going on?
Yeah, well, we put out a daily newsletter at our website, Bitcoin Market Journal, and a part of our mission is just to educate people on the things you're talking about and to give them a framework for how to think about this in a smart, value-based, long-term investing framework. But personally, I read a lot, but what really helps me is writing about it or creating the content. I see myself as an educator first and foremost. And it's in the process of educating others, of creating that content. I do a weekly column for our newsletter, and I edit our daily newsletter. And that work that I put into it, I see it almost as a service. I see this as like, this is a service I'm really providing for people to help them understand, because I've been in this space now, for a long time, relatively speaking, to help them understand how to put this stuff into perspective. That's what really locks it in for me, because when you're explaining it to someone else, when you're teaching someone else, that's when you really deeply learn it. And I'm sure you can relate running this podcast, like how much you've gotten out of creating this podcast and how much it's helped you synthesize your own thinking and kind of clarify your own philosophy in life just
Yeah.
from doing this, right?
Yeah. 100%. And just learning from people's perspectives and stories.
Yeah. So helping others, I think, is one of the best ways to really solidify and synthesize that learning for ourselves.
Yeah. I guess, obviously a lot of people are getting interested into the space, as you said, because of the financial returns that, Bitcoin has provided for the last several years. Beyond that, I mean, is there a top 3 things that, you're excited about that are, that people should be on the lookout for, or that you think will have tangible effects on society or life, in the next 3 to 5 years, that you think people should be on the lookout for?
Well, people ask me all the time, like, what should I invest in? What are the big investments that you're so successful at picking these? What are the ones I should pick? And what I tell most people is just go with the biggest projects. Again, that's Bitcoin and that's Ethereum. And I don't know what's in number 3 today. That always changes. But there's a lot of companies that I think are doing very interesting things in this space that will become, to me, like the Googles and the Apples of tomorrow. And again, it feels very much like those early days during that initial .com revolution, where you saw, you saw Google, you saw Amazon, you saw those companies like launching and getting started. They had that feel. So one of those companies is Coinbase, for example, and I am an investor in all these things, so just take that with a grain of salt. But Coinbase is one of the largest digital exchanges out there, meaning a place where people can buy and trade these cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. And it's a U.S. company. They're publicly traded. That means you can go buy their stock on the stock market through a regular brokerage account. And I think they're a terrific company. They've been around for years, and they're really kind of the gold standard in this space. Then you have other companies that are seemingly far removed, like NVIDIA. So NVIDIA makes the graphic cards. You may know they've been in very short supply during the pandemic because, first of all, people are like gamers use them for high-end gaming rigs, but they're also used for Bitcoin mining. So the way that NVIDIA has designed these graphics cards, there are very few competitors that do them with the speed and the quality that NVIDIA does, but they just haven't been able to keep up with the demand. So I think NVIDIA is another very interesting company that we can invest in sort of the traditional stock market, aside from owning cryptocurrencies, that is going to benefit from the kind of rise of this whole new global financial system. So those are a few ideas. And I'm not recommending you go out and buy them, but I am recommending to go check them out, take a look, and see what you think.
Is there anything you want to say about, And I'm not as educated, but on the negatives of whatever people are saying, obviously, um, there are some that are saying the environmental factor of mining. There are some talking about the volatility of Bitcoin. Um, I mean, maybe you know more, but is there anything that you would like to say in defense of any of uh, sort of the negatives that are currently out there in the mainstream thought process?
Yeah, I do a lot of speaking engagements, and this question always comes up. And there's two parts. So one is Bitcoin is environmentally unfriendly. So what are you doing about it? And my take on that is it's true. It is. And this is, again, because of these mining rigs, these superpowered computers that run the Bitcoin network that are running these millions of NVIDIA graphics cards consume enormous amounts of electricity. Now, first of all, there are other blockchains being developed that will overtake Bitcoin that are much more they have zero impact, or they're actually net zero. They have negative carbon footprint. So those will eventually overtake. In the meantime, what our governments could be doing is welcoming Bitcoin miners, but actually demanding that they use green or renewable energy in order to power those. So they could actually start building these industries in the US, but require them to build massive solar farms, or wind farms to power these, or even a percentage of these. That would be an outstanding way to start building our sustainable energy infrastructure at the expense of the crypto community, right? Like, I think that to me is such a no-brainer. We got to do that. The other thing people always bring up is, but isn't Bitcoin used for illicit terrorist financing and drug laundering? So uh, my take on that is, like, if you are a criminal using Bitcoin, you are a very stupid criminal, because Bitcoin is actually very traceable. So the nature of this blockchain technology is you actually have a record of every Bitcoin that's been sent anywhere around the world to anyone from the beginning of time. So it's actually a very bad way of trying to do illicit criminal behavior. Now, some criminals do, because, newsflash, a lot of criminals are actually not that smart. But if you really want to hide your illicit terrorist financing, you use cash, because cash is the truly dangerous thing. Cash is untraceable. Cash is the thing they used in every spy movie where they have to give the secret handoff. They do it in a duffel bag full of unmarked bills, cash, in the basement of a parking garage. That's how it's always done, is using cash. So cash is the real culprit, and cash is the thing we have to do away with.
What's your opinion on the government involvement? Even a lot of older people that I speak to kind of aren't getting into this space because they want some sort of SEC involved, like, being involved, or, just out of an abundance of caution for whatever decisions they make. What's your thought process or opinion on that?
Well, I respect people's opinion to wait until things are more fleshed out. I do. I mean, I think there are, if you think about it like a growth curve, there are early adopters who are kind of over here, and then, as you go up to the majority, and then you get to the sort of late majority, or the laggards. So many of those older folks are probably going to be on the laggard, and it may be another decade before they get involved with these digital assets. That's okay. That's okay. But for those of us who are, again, future focused, who are tech savvy, and who are eager to learn, I think it's a perfect time to be on the sort of early adopter curve. Eventually, we're going to get more government clarity on how all this stuff is regulated, and how investors are protected, and so forth. In the same way, like the early days of banking in the United States, for example, there was like very Wild West. They literally called them wildcat banks. There's these banks that would just pop up and just take people's money and start printing their own bills and stuff like that. And then finally, there was like a federal government came in and said, we're going to create a federal bank, the Federal Reserve, and we're going to stop a lot of these small players from minting their own money. It's the same thing happening today. You got people literally creating their own money in the form of these crypto assets, these cryptocurrencies. Eventually, there will be more regulation around it, and this will have a bigger structure. But in the meantime, it's terrific opportunity for investors, again, who are willing to be patient, do their homework, hold a small number of high quality digital assets for the long term, 5 or more years.
Yeah, you've written 2 books, Blockchain for Everyone and Blockchain Success
Yeah.
Stories. Can you maybe just talk about who could use the books, or what knowledge each of the books respectively provide?
Sure. Blockchain for Everyone is the investing book. So that's the book where I tell my personal story of betting the farm on Bitcoin and losing it all and then building it all back, and how we did that and how we multiplied our crypto investments ultimately many times over, the strategy that we use there and that we teach on our investing website. So that's a fun investing book that's actually fun to read. And that's also available as an audio book that we're very proud of. The Blockchain Success Stories is our blockchain business book. So this is really intended, it's 10 true life stories of modern businesses that have built themselves using blockchain technology. And we had, my co-author Evan and I had so much fun writing that book, going out and interviewing these founders of these like terrifically successful high growth blockchain companies and how they did it, what were the techniques they used, how they built their audience, how they did their marketing, and how they sort of technically built this blockchain infrastructure around this to really grow at scale. So we're very proud of that book too, because I think it gives a lot of the best practices that are like, we're still very early in this industry, but that's really our contribution there is sharing best practices about how to build a business in this space.
Yeah. You've written three books that I've mentioned. I'm curious, do you have any advice on the writing process and, for someone trying to become a first-time author?
Yeah, right. That's it. Right. So my story was when I started the comedy website I mentioned, Zug.com, I wrote a blog. And at that point, the word blog was not even a word. So it was just a daily page on the website. So a daily blog. I think I wrote that every day for 4 years before I got really any recognition at all. And then after 4 years of just doing that every day, just grinding it out and getting gradually better and better and better and learning what was funny and learning how to write and learning how the craft, we finally got a link from a big website back in the day. And that site linked and we got this massive flood of traffic. And from there, a lot of like smaller successes started following because now like people found us. And then I want to say 2 years after that, I got an email out of the blue. So I've been in this like 6 or 7 years at this point. And the email out of the blue said, I am an editor at Gallery Books, and I would like to offer you a proposal to write a book. Are you interested? That was it. That was the whole email.
Hey.
And I'm like, that cannot be real. So I looked him up, and sure enough, he was for real. And Jeremy, who's been my fantastic editor ever since, he moved over to Simon & Schuster. He was the one who edited Mind Hacking and then Blockchain for Everyone. I think the world of him. But he was, really early to that game to say, like, if we go find bloggers who already have a following, we're more likely to sell books because they have a built-in audience. And that was basically his strategy. He was the first one who figured that out. Now everybody does that. But the moral of the story is like, just work on honing the craft. Write because you love to write. Podcast because you love to podcast. And just do it again and again and again, relentlessly. Don't give up. Constantly try to improve your craft. And over time, some type of rewards will come. I don't know if it'll be a book deal or a movie deal or a Netflix series or something else, but eventually something good will come. That's a law of life, I've found. When we put good stuff out there, eventually something good will come back to us.
It seems like from your life story, you've never been afraid to be expressing, all of your passions, whether it's comedy, mind hacking, Bitcoin. I'm curious, how did you get that mindset? So many people are very black and white, and if they're in comedy, they're in comedy, and or if they're in music, they're in music, or if they're in Bitcoin, they're in Bitcoin. Some might have said to you, "You're not a psychologist. Like, why are you writing a mind hacking book?" Like, how have you like? Do you just not listen to those voices? Like, how have you been continuing to express yourself? No matter where or what type of industry or.
Yeah, people did say that. They did say, "You're not a psychologist. Why the hell are you writing this book?" They said, "Aren't you the former comedy writer and you're now writing an investment newsletter?" Like they said, "Aren't you the former drug addict? Like, aren't you now you're like telling people how to buy Bitcoin and things like that?" So, my philosophy on this has always been that we have to follow our passion and be true to ourselves even when that does not fit the mold of who we were in the past. We have to constantly be reinventing. I saw a great the Beastie Boys story on Apple TV recently. I was so inspired by that. By the way, the Beastie Boys constantly reinvented themselves throughout their career, including this actual stage show that they did as part of the show on Apple TV. It's terrific. And that type of artist or that type of creative personality, Steve Martin, the actor and comedian, he's another great example. He's a musician. He played banjo. He went on tour. He's written books. He's done movies, constantly reinventing himself. Prince was great at that. I think Kanye is great at that. All these artists that I've long admired have been amazing at just constantly reinventing themselves. So the way it's worked for me, the way I believe we do it, is we follow our passion. We look for something that's really interesting to us. Again, even if it's not something we've done before, and we just go all the way down that rabbit hole. We just like go all in on that thing. And then what we pull out of that, we try to express it into the world. We try to get it out there in some way. So that could be a podcast, that could be a screenplay, it could be a poem, it could be music, it could be a blog, it could be an academic paper, a piece of research. It could be just teaching other people. It could be, doing an online course and teaching people or something like that. But if we, again, try to then give back from what we've learned, what we've dug out of that deep well of passion, great things always come back to us, always. And our problem is that we get really hung up on the money. We get hung up on like, well, I got to get paid for doing this. If I'm going to put 1,000 hours into doing my Grateful Living podcast, I should be making something on this. And that's a huge trap that is so hard to avoid. Yeah. I still struggle to avoid it, but we have to avoid it because when we're passionately creating something, it always leads to something better. It's very hard to see it because it's not linear many times. We learn something on the side or we make a connection over here that ends up being extremely profitable or fruitful for us later in life. But when we can follow that passion, bring it out to people, it always comes back, man.
Yeah. John, we've talked about a good amount in this hour. Is there something you wish people asked you, or is there something on your mind that you'd like to talk about that you haven't had the chance to?
Yeah, I would like to tell everybody to go like and subscribe to Arnav's Grateful Living podcast because you know how much time and passion that he puts into this, and you got it for free. You get it for free. So all you need to do is just go rate it 5 stars on your favorite podcast app. You need to go like it and tell 10 friends about it. And then you've done your good deed. Your karma for the day is complete.
Thank you. I appreciate it. John, John, I just want to acknowledge you. It was really cool hearing your story. We went all over the place, which is what I like to do. Capture the personal and the professional. Thank you for sharing your story of becoming sober. That's something many hundreds of thousands of people deal with every day. So hopefully, someone out there listening can use what you had to say to their benefit. And thank you for sharing your knowledge on blockchain and Bitcoin. Um, as you said, it's sort of still in that early adoption period where I've heard figures of like 1 to 2% of the world is currently involved in it. So there's a lot that is still to come. And if anybody wants to support you or thank you in any way for the knowledge you provided this hour, are there social media handles that they can go visit? Is there something they can subscribe to for you? How can they support you?
Well, you can always connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to chat with people there. And our website, Bitcoin Market Journal, again, has a free newsletter if you want to learn more about this Bitcoin and crypto investing. And I write a weekly newsletter, a weekly column for that as well. So feel free to sign up there.
Awesome. Well, John, thank you so much for your time.
Nav, you're a great podcaster. You did great research on this. Really appreciate being here. Thanks.
Thank you.